Hello, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Uh, can, can you folks hear me? I see a broken voice. Right. So looks like we're only three today, but let's start. So we'll try to finish one small topic. Very important topic. I think the other folks are definitely missing this topic. So this is about. Can you see my screen, folks?
Yes.
Okay. So this is about tuning the name node or tuning the Hadoop file system. It's also about administering the Hadoop file system. How effectively an administrator can take care of Hadoop file system by tuning various different parameters of the configuration. So that is the plan for today. Okay. So first three slides, we know it. We have seen this. So yesterday we discussed the slides, files and blocks, how it happens. Okay, this is related to file system. So again, the file is the file information, which is the name node, and actual data is the data nodes. So there is a client library, Hadoop client library. It is part of Hadoop-core.jar. So it is part of, look at the So again, let's take a look at this directory. So I went into Hadoop home, Hadoop installation directory, and you can see so many files here. So the client library that we're talking about is actually Hadoop-0.20.2.core.jar. Okay. So that is the one which is having the whole of Hadoop client library. So one more time. So in this case, we have the word count program in Hadoop-0.20-2 examples.jar. We have a word count program in this. So when you want to run the word count program, what we do? We supply examples.jar, right? And we don't supply -core.jar because by default, the Java will take a class path, and that class path has this particular file in the class path. So that's the reason why we don't specify this -core.jar. But the actual client, the client itself is in Hadoop 0.20.2-examples.jar, and the Hadoop library is here. Okay, and Hadoop -0.20.2.ant.jar is for Java developers and also sometimes administrators. So if you know Ant is a build tool in Java. Now people are using more of Maven and Gradle. They are using Maven and Gradle nowadays, but previously Ant was very famous. So that is an Ant tool. So this tool will provide some tasks where you can execute Hadoop related commands inside an Ant script. Then Hadoop -0.20.2-test.jar, right? This particular one contains anything to do with the testing. So if a developer wants to do testing without running the program in the cluster, these are the tools that are provided, right? So in this -test.jar, you will see there will be MR unit. MR unit is the framework for running unit test cases. And also you will also see mini clusters simulated. Okay, so this mini cluster sim, so you can really test most of the programs without actually running on the production cluster or the main cluster. Tools contain some miscellaneous tools. Hadoop-020.2.tools.jar contains some tools. I'm not sure what is inside. So if you look at ls here some more, there is one directory called contrib. You know the conf directory, right? We have seen this. The conf directory consists of all the configuration files. Conf directory consists of all the configuration files. We have seen several files. Okay. Now there is also a contrib directory, contributions directory. There you will see several contributions from various different people, companies, etc. So you will see there is a capacity scheduler, there is a data join, there is an Eclipse plugin, there is a FailMon, FailShare scheduler, HDFS proxy, Hadoop on demand, then there is an index, then there is a streaming. We have discussed the streaming, right? So people who want to use other than Java in writing MapReduce programs, they can use the streaming.jar. Streaming.jar works in two ways. One, it works by streaming the data from Hadoop file system to the other program, and the second way is it communicates using sockets. So both the mechanisms are used. So there is one plugin that you might hear very soon. It's getting popular. There is also a project called R. So how many of you heard of a project called R?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Okay.
The one that is used for statistic analysis.
Yes, that is correct. The one that is used for statistic modeling. So there is a plugin called R Hadoop. Basically what it does, it links R and Hadoop together. So R Hadoop uses streaming.jar. So it uses both the mechanisms. First mechanism is the data from the Hadoop file system is streamed to the program using standard in and standard out. The second mechanism is each of these programs, Hadoop file system and the external program, they open sockets. Just like TCP, they open TCP/IP sockets, and they are also called as pipes. They call it as pipes. So using those pipes, they communicate and work together. So generally in R Hadoop, the output of a MapReduce job is given as input to R Hadoop. So R is very good in analyzing the data. So the results of the MapReduce are usually pushed to the R, and R can actually interpret the results, or you can model the results in R very nicely. Okay, so one more thing again, if you are using streaming.jar, whichever tool that you are using, either it is Ruby, Python, or C++, or R, this particular tool has to be installed on every slave node and every task tracker, otherwise it will not work. So you can invoke MapReduce programs from R program very easily by pushing R programs to each of the task trackers. Okay, so these are the contribution directory. Okay, now if you see, we covered almost everything here. There is a C++ directory here, so you will see some C++ related stuff. Okay, so let's take what is there in i38632. So you have include files, you have lib files. So those are the things that you will link to your C++ program in order to run MapReduce programs. And the lib folder contains all the jars that are used by the Hadoop. So this is the lib lib folder. Okay, it consists of all these jars. It consists of commons, -CLI, codec, HTTP client, blogging, net, and then all this stuff. Then there is one directory called native. Okay, so you might wonder sometimes what is native. Okay, so it is not a directory. What is it? Okay, it is under lib. So what is native? So generally in Hadoop file system, if you want to save space or if you want to manage the files efficiently, you need to compress the files. For compression there are different mechanisms, and for compression there are different compressors and decompressors. It is called as codecs, C-O-D-E-S. They are called as codecs. Okay, so generally the codecs are available in the native mode. In the sense they have been written in C and C++. Can you folks hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so generally these programs are written in C and C++. So what happens is, in order to get the maximum performance out of this compressor and decompressor libraries, we will use Java native interface. Again, it's a developer thing, we don't have to worry, but as an administrator you have to make sure that these libraries or external libraries are installed in the system so that Hadoop can work faster. That is the idea. So by default, Hadoop will pick up the native libraries for compression and decompression. If there is a native library available, it will pick up that. Otherwise, it will pick up the Java libraries that are packaged as part of the Java virtual machine. Okay, so that is the funda about the native directory. So you will see other different jars. They're all used as part of. They're all dependencies for Hadoop. Okay, so that's about it. And then the web apps folder. The web apps folder consists of the browser related tool. Right, we have seen we can browse file system. We have also seen we looked at the job tracker. Yeah, sorry. So we have looked at the browser, and the browser, when you actually go to localhost :5030, you will see it's a job tracker browser page. You can see how many task trackers are there, what are their machines, and how many jobs it is running. So that particular app is in this directory, web apps. Okay, is it clear? So similarly, other web pages are being served from this web apps directory. I hope you guys are following me. Okay, so as an administrator, you should know, or it is expected that you would know, the complete directory structure for Hadoop. So we have covered almost everything here. The docs contain the docs directory. These are nothing but different docs. I think this is very important for you to read all these docs. Then what else? So bin, right? We have seen a bin folder. In the bin folder, we know what it is because it has all the scripts to start and stop our Hadoop, right? It has Hadoop config.sh, Hadoop daemon.sh, Hadoop daemons.sh, slaves.sh, start all, start balancer. Okay, so let me go one by one. So start all, we know if you do a start all, it will start all the Hadoop file system processes, and it will also start the job tracker and task tracker. So if there are any slaves nodes, it will use slaves.sh. The same start all.sh will use slaves.sh and start the task tracker and the data node on all the slave nodes. So start balancer.sh, you can do data nodes might have blocks, data blocks that were not balanced. Some data nodes may be having more load compared to others. In order to balance it, you can do a start-balancer.sh. So you can find the syntax, it's easy to run. Start-dfs.sh, that is for starting the name node. You can use start-all.sh, or you can also use start-dfs.sh for starting the name node and data node. Start-map-read.sh, right? There is a start-map-read.sh. This is used for starting the job tracker and the task tracker. Then for each of this, there is a stop script, and then there are 4 more files, which is Hadoop config.sh, Hadoop daemon.sh, and Hadoop daemons.sh, right? So generally Hadoop, we have seen this is a shell script. This is a shell script that will execute all your commands. So it will be file system commands, or it will be map reduce command, or it could be maintenance commands, or it could be anything. You can also have other commands like dfs admin and things like that. Okay, if you have practiced the Hadoop system commands, there are a couple of admin commands also there. So that's part of the Hadoop file system commands. Similarly, you can create jobs, submit jobs, kill jobs using this Hadoop script. Now Hadoop-config.sh, this is where you configure various different this is, I think, not much. Basically it is just to make sure that this is run for verification. I believe this is not very active. Okay, so it will just set the configuration file and also the slaves. What are the slaves? Okay, now let's go back to conf. So this is the conf file. So out of this file, so you folks are following me?
Yes.
Any question, let me know. Okay, so all right. So in this example, let's go one by one again in the conf directory. So we have seen core-site.xml, that is the configuration for name node, where the name node is going to run, right? Let me open that. So this is the default.name. This is the property that you have to set, and the value should be the place where the name node is running. In my case, it is running in localhost at port number 9000. That's what it means. Okay, so Hadoop env.sh. So this is an important file, Hadoop env.sh for administrators. This file has the options to pass to different processes in Hadoop cluster. You can set Hadoop heap size, Hadoop options. You can also set what are the different. These are all JVM options also. You can set some JVM, Hadoop-name node-options, Hadoop-secondary name node options, data node options, balancer options, job tracker options, task tracker options. So what are these options? They are nothing but some arguments to the programs that we have been running: name node, data node, task tracker, and job tracker. These are the arguments. So you can pass some arguments to them. Okay. So these are the same arguments that will be, hopefully, if you, for every slave, there is a file for every slave. So this particular file is usually same across all the slaves. Okay. So Hadoop underscore slaves. So you can configure several things here. You can also configure master, Hadoop, and things like that. Okay. So you have seen Hadoop core site, you have seen Hadoop env.sh, and you have Hadoop -metrics.properties, Hadoop policy. So this one I'm not sure. I'll let you know, guys, about this. But Hadoop-site we know. Hadoop-site.xml. It is the properties related to name node and data node. So that is the subject we're going to discuss for the rest of the class today. Then you have log4j properties for logging. Then you have mapred-site. These properties are for the job tracker and the task tracker. And masters, if you see masters, so masters is a file where the job tracker and the task tracker are running, and generally it is the job tracker. So masters is a file where you will mention the name of the file where the job tracker is running, because this is used for submitting the job. So like this. Okay. So if we have 200 nodes, there will be 200 or 300 entries here. Each of these are slaves. So when you do bin start all.sh, when you do this, what is going to happen is it is going to start name node, job tracker. It is also going to start data node and task tracker on all the slaves. Okay, when you do stop, it is also going to stop data node and task tracker on all the slave nodes. Okay, so that's why it is going to take some time. If you have to take the whole data center up and running, if you shut it down, it takes some time to actually start up. Is it clear? So far so good. In one class, we will actually configure a cluster, and you will be able to understand how to configure a cluster. So that time we will see master and slaves. You will actually put some entries and make sure that in the cluster you will have more than one server running. Okay. Any questions? Any questions? Hello?
No.
Okay, good. So let's go through then how we are going to configure Hadoop file system in more depth. Okay, so I'm going to go through the slides one more time. So we have seen this. This is pipelining, right? Then we have seen name node and secondary name node, and the importance of edit logs and FS image. So this one, name node failover, is not available in MapReduce version 1, but it is available in MapReduce version 2. Okay, so basically you might have heard about something called Zookeeper. So Zookeeper, I have a small set of slides. I will run through this at some point. So Zookeeper is basically a distributed naming service, right, or a locking service system. So what it means is you can use Zookeeper to monitor all the machines in Hadoop cluster. Because it is monitoring all the elephants, that's why they have probably renamed it as Zookeeper. It is actually keeping or taking care of the zoo. That is one. Second, it can help in name node failover. For example, let's say I have a name node here and it is active and it has its own metadata, or the NFS images. When I say metadata here, on the first cylindrical box on the left hand side, that is having the FS image and edit logs. A copy of it is also present in NFS storage. A copy of it is also present in another disk called NFS storage or NFS filer. It is also shared metadata, right? So when the name node which is active fails, the Zookeeper detects it. The failover controller will detect it and inform the Zookeeper, and the Zookeeper will actually make sure that its name node is completely down before bringing up the other standby name node, which will use the same copy of the NFS filer and then also has its own metadata, right? So that's what that is for failover. So in MapReduce version 1, it is not there. You would actually do manual failover. So the right hand side of the portion is not there, but you will still have, you don't have a Zookeeper, so you will have a name node which is active and then it has its own metadata. So you can maintain multiple copies of this metadata. So one copy is in the local system, the other copy is in the NFS system. You can also maintain one more copy in a separate place so that it is more secure and you will be able to recover name node easily. So when the name node goes down because of some reason, let's say this disk has failed, right, or the disk is corrupted, or for some reason it failed, then what we do is you can use the copy that is backed up in NFS filer and then restart the name node. So that is the whole thing. So the whole point of MRV1, MapReduce version 1, is to make sure that you have the FS image, you have multiple copies of FS image, and in case you are lost with one copy, you always have multiple copies. And generally in this cluster, in MapReduce version 1, it's the companies have their own scripts to do failover and become highly available. So whereas it is inherently not part of MapReduce version 1 design. So again, if somebody asks you a question, how does it work in MapReduce version 1? You will say you will have to maintain multiple copies of FS image on different disks and also have a copy in some shared NFS storage. So if any of these file gets corrupted, you have another copy to restart the name node, and this happens manually. Some companies have written the scripts also for making this run automatically, but that is not part of version 1. Is it clear? So name node federation is coming up in MRV2, but we don't have to discuss. Generally what name node federation is, basically the FS image is distributed and each name node has its own directory structure that it is going to service, and it has its own set of data nodes. So the name node is becoming highly available in this case. So these are the configuration files that we discussed. Okay, so we will go through some of this. So because you have seen this fs-default.name. It is in core site.xml. So this is what we're talking about. Okay, so this is the property. So we've seen this property. Then there is dfs.data directory. So I'm sure you must have seen this too. So this is, you can see that there is a property called dfs.data directory and dfs.name directory, and you have dfs.replication. So this property replication is simple. How many times each block is replicated. And this one, dfs.name.directory, is basically where you're storing your fs image. So I can show you that. So in my case, so you can see I have name node, right? I have name node, and under that name node I have image, right? So that is the fs image. So the directory that what we saw is up to the name node. So again, let me open this file, hdfs-site.xml. So this directory, name node directory, dfs.name.directory, is the directory where you are going to place the name node related files. So you can give here comma separated values. You can give, say, nfs:// some other drive / name node. You can also have one more copy. You can say /disk2 / name node / this one. So if you give comma separated values, so the name node, or whenever checkpointing happens, all the 3 copies are updated automatically. So you have 2 more copies, not just 1. Okay, you are getting me? You folks are following me? Yes?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
So similarly, the data node dfs.data.directory consists of the storage place for all the blocks. So in my case, I have given this directory, right? You can also give comma separated multiple paths, right? So in such a case, what it does is it will do a round robin. So in order to balance the disks, what it will do, it can copy one block in one directory, another block in another directory. So this is not about replication here. It is about managing the storage space by the data node, because data node will save millions of data blocks, millions and millions of data blocks. Each block is 64 MB. So where are those blocks stored? They are stored in this directory. They are stored in this directory. So give a comma separated values here. What it will do, it will store these block nodes on a round robin fashion, right? It won't store, it will try to balance within itself. Even if one disk goes bad, then there is a problem. It's not about replication, it's about the data node storage itself. Okay, so this is about dfs.data.directory. So I've used the word called just a bunch of disks. Okay, so that is the common word is used in the Hadoop cluster. So if you have to add couple of more disks to data node, you can just add it, and you can provide the comma separated values on the dfs.data directory, and suddenly you have more storage for the same data node. So it is just, it's all about, if you look at a good machine, let's say IBM machine, a rack machine or blade machine, you just plug in the disk, right? Hot plugin is available. It's called just a bunch of disks, right? You just put just a bunch of disks together and you have large storage capacity. So you can remove or push these hard disks very easily. And the moment you put in a hard disk, that is mounted to your file system, and that file system path you have to mention it in comma separated values for data node directory or the name node directory, either way. So the word just a bunch of disk is coming from that perspective, where you can keep adding bunch of disks to the cluster as it is. So if you want to increase the capacity, just go to the shop, buy 20 more terabytes, each hard disk 1 terabyte, 20 nodes, just attach it to each of the node and you are good to go. So this is fs.checkpoint.directory. It is used by the secondary name node. So all these values are not specified. By default, Hadoop will take a temporary directory for doing all this. Right? Again, it's a comma separated list of directories used by the secondary name node to store metadata during checkpointing process. Okay, is it clear? So if you want to see how it works, so you just have to say 4yy, right, and put this file. So you here will say dfs.checkpoint.directory, and you can say here, or you can say here, right, /fs/checkpoint underscore directory / secondary name node. That's what you would do. And you can also give comma separated values. Okay, is it clear? dfs.permissions.supergroup. This is almost like root permissions or special privilege permissions for the Hadoop cluster. So people or the users who are part of this group are given special privileges, and they can do pretty much anything with the file system. So they can go ahead and list files and things like that. So for example, in case of normal users, myself, Reddy, and let's say there is one more guy called John. So both of us cannot see each other's file system if file system permissions are properly set. But these people from DFS permissions.supergroup can see the files from all the users. Okay. So io.file.buffer size, right? It is usually by default, I think it's a general purpose buffer size that is used for input and output. So when name node is trying to read and write, it is actually using the io.file.buffer size. By default, it is 4 KB. Okay. So then there is one more parameter down, dfs.balance.bandwidth per second. So you folks are following me?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. So I hope it's just good enough. It's good enough if you run through this once, and then if someone asks a question, you will have an answer. So the dfs.balance.bandwidth per second is the how much of bandwidth should be used during balancing. Okay, so what does it mean? So while doing balancing, there will be a lot of data nodes that will be copied from, there will be a lot of data blocks that will be copied from one data node to other data node during balancing. So during that time, if there is too much of copy and if the network is busy with this kind of copy, then the cluster will not be able to efficiently serve the jobs in terms of the performance. So in order to make sure that during the balancing process, you want to limit how much of network bandwidth is used by each data node. So that's what this parameter is. So it is easy to understand. If you add, let's say, 2 data nodes and then do a Hadoop space DFS admin space refresh nodes, the name node will initialize these 2 data nodes and recognize that these are got just added, then it will probably start balancing. So if the balancing starts, there will be huge amount of traffic. So in order to restrict the traffic and still do servicing the clients, right? So this dfs.balance.bandwidth per second is used. Okay, so that is the purpose. Okay, so this one we have discussed heavily. This is the block size. By default it is 64 MB and it is kept as a number, right? So it is not 64 MB, it is, you have to convert that into bytes and give this number in your configuration file. Okay, so for 128 MB you have to give this big number 134217728. You can also change the block size in the middle. That's what these guys are saying. If you change the block size, it will not affect the existing files. Only the new files that were created will have the new block size, and the old files will continue to use the same old block size, and you will continue to read the files for the old block size only. So that kind of support is there, which is a good thing. Okay, so dfs dot data node dot disk usage dot reserved. Okay, so why do we need to reserve this space, right? Why do we need to reserve this space on the data node? Okay, so this is important. So when the output of maps are stored, the output of maps are stored in the local disk. The local disk is nothing but the disk of data nodes, right? That is where the intermediate outputs are also stored. They are not stored as blocks, they are stored as with the internal format, but they are stored in the same storage space. Suppose if we don't reserve any space for intermediate outputs. Suppose if we don't reserve,
We can't hear you, Reddy.
output of the maps. Is this point clear? It is roughly about generally recommended reserve disk space for intermediate outputs is 10 gigabytes. So is it clear what is this reserved space is?
Can you please repeat?
Okay. Again, you have to go back to
There are 5 other callers on the call.
so what it means is that when you have the input being processed by the map functions, right? And in fact, there is one more picture, I think. Where is that picture? That picture is not there. Okay, I think it is there. Okay, here it is. So when the output of the maps, right? When the output of the map is stored in the local disk of each node. Okay, where is this task running? The task is running in a task tracker where data node is also present in that particular machine. So the task tracker and data node works in Tango. So the output of the map in this case on this task tracker machine where the task is running, it has to be stored onto the disk, right? Once this buffer is full, you have to store it to the disk. From the disk, it will get transferred to the reduced task. From the disk, it gets transferred to the reduced task. Suppose if there is no disk space here in the map in the machine where the map task is running, your map task will fail, right? So what we are only trying to do is we are trying to reserve some space so that the Hadoop file system cluster, while allocating space for data blocks, it will not eat into the reserve, okay, even by mistake. Is it clear? If you do, suppose if you don't do it, if you don't reserve the space, what will happen? The Hadoop cluster, as it grows in size, it is like a monster. Wherever there is disk space, it will keep allocating the data blocks and it will grow. So it will also eat every other space if we are not monitoring it. So in order for the MapReduce programs to run, without failing because of non-availability of disk space, you are reserving some disk space in the data node for storing intermediate outputs of a map task. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. So this is another important performance parameter used by the name node, dfs.namenode.handler.count, right? So let's say if 20 clients are trying to create new files, how is the name node going to handle it? So if it is only one thread, if it is only one process, then all these 20 clients have to wait. So in order for name node to service these clients simultaneously, this particular parameter dfs.namenode.handler.count will assign so many handlers. So if you assign a default of 10, it can service 10 clients simultaneously or 10 requests simultaneously. Okay, so that's what it means. Generally, it is set to the logarithm of number of nodes in the cluster multiplied by 20, right? So that's what is the general formula that people recommend. So why this formula? I think based on their experience, they have recommended this formula. So if there are 100 nodes in the cluster, let's say 100 nodes are there. So log 100 of 100 is 10. 10 star 20 is 200. So you will have to set this particular count to 200. So if you see that, connections are timing out or connections are refused while trying to connect to name node, then you know that this handler count is probably low. One of the reasons is that this handler count is probably low, so you can go ahead and increase this limit so that name node can start servicing multiple clients simultaneously. Okay, so this is another important parameter. You will definitely use this dfs.datanode.failed.volumes.tolerated. So what happens is, let's say you have 4 or 5 disks, right? And what it says is that the number of disks that are permitted to fail before failing the entire data node. So by default, even if a single disk fails, the whole data node is taken down. Okay, but if it is set to 1, then even if one disk fails, the data node will only take off those blocks that are present in the disk, and it will continue to operate for other data blocks without any problem. So this is, so generally in Hadoop cluster, you will see by default it is 0, but in generally they will set it to 1. The moment you will wait till, even if one disk fails, you don't want to take the data node down. You want to continue to operate. So meanwhile, you can find another hard disk and put it as part of this data node so that it can recover fast. So if you don't put this value to 1 or 2, what we'll do is, as soon as it loses a disk, it will bring the data node down, which means all the files in that particular data node, all the blocks related to files in the data node become unavailable for some time until name node figures out and starts replication. Okay, is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. So sometimes you want to be more secure, right? In the sense that if there is a meeting happening, generally in the companies, you invite the people, right? So, but you don't want people just come and join the meeting. So similarly, sometimes some people in the company may create a machine or may create a data node, and then they can make it join the cluster without knowing to the administrator, right? So some machines can be added to the cluster without even considering the administrator. So administrator wants to have control on what data nodes or what machines I should accept as part of the cluster and what I should not accept. So the file dfs.host will list all the IP addresses or host names of the data node where they are allowed to be part of the cluster. Okay, if you don't use this file, then everybody who has a data node can be part of the cluster. But if you use this file, only those names inside this file are allowed to be part of the cluster. Other machines will not be able to enter the cluster. So this is also one way to decommission a data node. So if you want to take one data node down, so what you do is you take the entry from this file, you delete the entry from this file, then what will happen? The data node will not be able to communicate to the name node, and the name node realizes that, okay, so this particular data node is down. Then it will do replication process, or it will try to assign some other data node for the blocks that this particular data node has. Okay, is it clear? This is only for clusters where there are strong security requirements. Who wants to control the access to the cluster? So the file format new line separated list of host names are IP addresses. So there is also one more file. So there's also one more file, dfs.host.exclude. Okay, so these machines that are in this particular file are excluded from joining the cluster. Right? Again, this is a new line separated list. So you want to use, if you want, you can use both the files, or you can use only one file. So this is for preventing some machines to join the cluster. You don't want the rogue machines to join the cluster. This is how you want to say this machine should not join. So either way, if you use any of these files, the data nodes cannot arbitrarily join. So this is another way to decommission a node. I was telling you earlier also, you can remove it from dfs.host and add it to here. When you say exclude a data node, then what happens? The name node will detect it is being excluded and start decommissioning process, or start transferring the data blocks in this data node to other data nodes. Okay. fs.trash.interval, right? So it is the amount of time in minutes the data in the trash to be retained before cleaning it, right? So users are free to move the file back out of the .trash directory as they would in any other file, which effectively restores the file. The default value of 0 indicates that the trash feature is disabled. So this is for making sure by accidentally, if someone deletes a file in the cluster, it will not get deleted immediately. Instead, it will be moved to the trash folder, and if required, you can actually recover from the trash folder later on. And if you want to set some time, let's say a few days or minutes, you can set the time saying how much time the file can be there in the trash directory before it gets automatically deleted. You can also explicitly delete the contents of the trash using Hadoop space fs minus expunge. Using this command, you can explicitly delete the contents of the trash directory. Okay. So there is again another command called Hadoop space fs minus rm minus skip trash. Okay, you can skip deleting the files from the trash when you do delete a file. Okay, so HDFS user space quotas, right? So different users want different storage requirements. It could be through a department or a group, right? It could be users, right? Within a department, it could be users. So you can, since it is a hierarchical file system, you can set how much disk space that each of these users can get it, or each of these departments can get it. So how do you do that? Here in this case, let's see. You have a root and you have a data. You can see there is some user activity. You can also see there is a syslog directory, and these are also some purchases. So these are shared data sets, the machine generated, and there is no specific quotas for them. We don't want to assign any quota because they keep growing. You can also specify quota, this is fine. Then you have a groups directory, and under groups you have a research, fraud analysis, and operations, right? So you can say I want 20 terabytes for research quota, or you have 100 terabytes for fraud analysis, something like that. Then you have users folder where you can say each of these users have 1 terabyte quota per user. So 50 terabyte is assigned to users. Out of this, each terabyte is assigned to each of the users. How do you assign the quota? This is the command. So if you want to set a 10 GB quota on the path. So if you want to set the 10 GB quota on for the user eSAMR, you can say Hadoop space DFS admin minus set space quota okay, and then give the 10 GB and then give the user home directory. So it will set a quota of 10 GB for user. Suppose if the guy is already using 20 GB and then you set the size to 10 GB. So what Hadoop file system does, it will not delete the existing files, but it will not allow creation of new files. So that is the policy that it will adopt. Okay, so you can use the command to view the quota for the user. So Hadoop fs minus count minus q user slash eSAMR. You can use this command to find out what is the quota for that particular user. You can also removing the space quota in a directory. Hadoop DFS admin clear space quota path command. So if there is a quota assigned to some person in this particular directory, you want to make sure that nobody gets a quota on this. You can just clear the space quota. That's what it means. The quota information is removed from this particular path. Okay, so now how do I add a node? How do I add a data node to a system, right? So what you can do, if you are adding a fresh node, this is a common process. If you are adding a fresh node, add the IP address of the data node to the file specified in the DFS host parameter. Each entry should be separated by new line character, and execute the command Hadoop space DFS admin minus refresh nodes. Okay, is it clear? So as the HDFS super user or super user group, you can run this command, then it will recognize the data node. If there is a rack awareness, right? If there is a rack awareness, you have to update any rack information necessary for the new host. So if you remember, we discussed yesterday about the distance between blocks using a numerical value. So the distance d is equal to 2, 4, 6 and 8, right? And d is equal to 0. So that is the distance he is talking about. In order to use, or in order for the cluster to use that facility, you have to assign each data node to a particular rack, okay, particular rack, and that's all you do as an administrator. Then the distances are automatically calculated by the Hadoop cluster. So that's what he means by, if you are using rack awareness, update any rack information necessary for new host. Okay, and then once you have this done, start the data node process and go and check the name node web UI or the output of Hadoop DFS admin minus report to confirm that the new host is connected. So this is something that you can do very easily. So you can take this as an exercise and then add a data node to the cluster. Okay, so what is the simplest procedure? Add the machine to dfs.host, make sure that you have a storage directory in place, and then the directory is available, and then execute a command dfs admin. So this command, you can execute, you have to execute in for the name node. Okay, you have to execute for the name node, and the person who can execute is user with super privileges or super group privileges. And if you are using any rack awareness, if you want your machine to be part of a rack and use the capability of distance calculations in allocating data blocks and also allocating tasks, you should use rack awareness. In that case, you have to include this particular machine as part of that file also. I'll show you, if we have time later on, I can show you where you do the rack also. And then you start the data node process, and then you can check the name node web UI to see if the data nodes are running or not. Similarly, you can do a decommissioning of a data node. So how do you decommission a data node? You can add the address of the IP address of the data node to the dfs.host.exclude parameter, and again each entry should be separated by new line character. Again do the command dfs admin minus refresh nodes as the HDFS super user. You do that command, then it will decommission the node, and then keep looking at the web UI of the name node. After a few seconds, you will see this data node should vanish from the web UI. and it is going to take some time. So it may take half a day, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours before the data node gets decommissioned. And you're purposefully doing the decommissioning because for several reasons. You would be probably doing to upgrade a cluster with new set of machines, right? Or you want to add a new disk during the process, maybe it has failed, or you want to add like extra 2 terabyte capacity, but your machine is not capable of adding these disks in hot swap manner. In the sense, when the power is on, system is on, these IBM systems, HP and Dell systems, little bit expensive systems, but not that expensive. We can add disk while the system is up and running. It is called as hot swap. Okay. So if your machines are not supporting hot swap, and if you want to add new disks to the data node, you must have to bring probably the data node down and then add this disk and then bring it up. So that is what it is doing. So once you bring it down, it is going to take a while for this particular data node to go away, because it has to take all the blocks away from here and move it to a different data node. So it might take hours and sometimes days.
I have a doubt, Reddy.
Yeah.
For adding a node, can you go to the last slide? This is something that we need to do on the name node. So if you're bringing a data node, what things do we need to do on the data node?
Okay, so you have to make sure Hadoop distribution is available. Okay, you have to make sure that your core-site.xml contains the address of the name node that it has to talk to. You have to make sure that mapred-site.xml contains the address of the job tracker, right? The property mapred. You remember mapred.jobtracker.host. Similarly, fs.default.name in core site. So they should point to that. And any other parameters that you want to use, for example, in hdfs-site.xml, you want to configure data directory with list of bunch of disks. So then you make sure that all the configuration is there, Hadoop distribution is there, and then you should be able to make sure that the master should be able to do SSH onto this machine. In that case, you have to generate a public private key and then take this public key of the slave and add it to the master or the name node, so that the name node will be able to start and stop data nodes. Similarly, job tracker will be able to start and stop data nodes on this slave node. So, and then once all these are done, then you can go to data node and say start the data node. So how can you start the data node? You can say Hadoop daemon.ssh. So there is a separate script in the bin directory, Hadoop daemon.sh. You can use that, Hadoop-daemon.sh. You can say start data node, or you can use start dfs.sh, start data node. So that also you can use. So one of those you can use to start the data node. And similarly, you can use start mapred.sh to start the job task tracker. So both can be started on the data node. Once it is started, then it's part of the cluster, and then you can see it in the web UI. It's clear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you can also sometimes check the integrity of the Hadoop file system using a command called fseek. So you can say hdfs sudo -u hdfs Hadoop fseek. Hadoop fseek will allow you to check the integrity of the file system. So it will basically check if all the data nodes are healthy, if all the files are intact, all the block sizes are good enough. So you can just read the contents of this particular file. Okay. So fseek will locate the blocks and make sure that it will be able to check the integrity of the whole file system. So it will talk to name node, get the list of files, talk to data node, list of blocks, and make sure that all the blocks are present for that file with the corresponding replication factor. So that's all. Logging we will discuss tomorrow. You have a couple of properties where you can set to determine to do logging. As an administrator, you might have to do food logging. So there's a couple of properties that you can set to do effective logging. By default, you should know on name node and data nodes there is a logs directory, right? So this logs directory consists of the files that are there are files, and also for each job there is a configuration.xml that gets created, right? So if you see, all the properties that are used for the job are here, okay? So that even if later on properties changes, this job will continue to run with the same properties that are there. Okay, similarly, there are a lot of log files in this directory. So these log files will be used for debugging what is happening inside the machine. So if you see some displays not there, connection refused, IPC timeouts, right? Data directory being cleaned, these kinds of things, then you would be able to open this log file and see why it is happened and what time it happened, things like that. Okay, so that is about today's class. Any questions?
Can you please send the slides for today and yesterday?
Yeah, I will do that. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks folks. Bye.